David Harsanyi to join me. We might have had a little miscommunication, I don't know, but he is scheduled to join me. He's the author of a book called Eurotrash: Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. And then at 2 p.m., as an honor, to be joined by Peter Navarro, the author of In Trump Time, A Journal of America's Plague Year, a book that delves into, well, he was a trade representative, he's an economist, an advisor to the Trump administration on China policy, which of course was extremely successful. And his book is about the last year of the Trump administration and President Trump's response to the pandemic, the events of the election, and what happened there, some of the things that we're not allowed to talk about at YouTube. And then finally, the culmination of what I would describe as a soft coup, and I hope I don't get taken down for saying that, which was the events of January 6th, the Capitol incursion. So that's going to be at 2 p.m., and that's with Peter Navarro. Meanwhile, I'm going to wait for David Harsanyi, and in the meantime, let me swing open the phone lines. You're welcome to join the program. Let's just see here. I wish I could have the technical savvy to. Here we go. 617-396-4958 is the number. 617-396-4958. President Trump is launching a social network, which will be available, hopefully, February of next year. Couldn't come anytime sooner. It's great. Let me just see. I'm going to just go to an article about this. You know, maybe we could get finally a little bit of free speech back in this country, hopefully, God willing. Trump announces, this is from the Gateway Pundit. Trump announces launch of his own social media platform that will, quote, fight back against the tyranny of big tech. Now, if you go to the Gateway Pundit, you can click on and open an app and get on the waiting list. I've already done that, and I urge everyone to do it. It's going to be called Truth Social. President Trump has officially announced that he will be launching his very own social media platform, which will be called Truth Social. The much anticipated service is expected to go online sometime in early 2022. If you sign up for it, it says February. And this is meant to be a direct assault against big tech's crippling censorship that has continuously ramped up since President Trump was booted off of the internet 10 months ago. But great things come to those who wait. The big orange meanie will finally, once again, be free to melt liberal snowflakes on a daily basis. I created Truth Social and TMTG to stand up to the tyranny of big tech. We live in a world where the Taliban has a huge presence on Twitter, yet your favorite American president has been silenced, Trump said in an announcement. Trump will serve as the chairman of the newly formed Trump Media and Technology Group, which will oversee operations of Truth Social. The group explained that the platform will relentlessly fight back against big tech and compete directly against other social networks that operate within the current liberal media consortium, which has been used its unmitigated power to silence opposing voices and ideas online. This is unacceptable. I am excited to send out my first truth on Truth Social very soon. TMTG was founded with a mission to give a voice to all. I'm excited to soon begin sharing my thoughts on Truth Social and to fight back against big tech. The app is currently available for pre-order on the Apple App Store and plans for beta version for testers sometime in November. After the testing is finished, a nationwide public launch is expected in the first quarter of 2022, according to the TMTG announcement. Sign up for the pre-order list. You can go to the Apple App Store and ask for Truth Social. So I think this is significant news for any of us who care about free speech. I hope that it has a live streaming aspect, because I think that could take on YouTube. And we can hope that this tyranny of censorship might come to an end. Maybe I'm kind of wishfully thinking in that regard. I don't know. You can hope and pray that this will happen. I don't know if it'll ever fully happen, but obviously, in my opinion, it can't happen too soon. I noticed that when I put this up on TikTok, which, by the way, has banned my live stream for 1 week. I hopefully will be back. I'm not able to get on YouTube. That's weird. Okay, let me try it this way. Let's see what's happening. I want to just see if I'm getting the live show here. All right, there we go. Let's see. Are we live on YouTube? I don't know if I can I take, yeah, I mean, it says I'm live right now. So I wonder if I could take YouTube. I don't know if I can I take, yeah, I think that if I lower right now, if I lower the headphones, I could possibly take a chat. I don't see anything that says that. Okay, never mind. Just in my own inept way, I'm just experimenting here a little bit. All right, so let's put that aside. You're welcome to join the conversation. I can't do chat today because I'm banned from TikTok until next week, but I can take live calls, 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. I'm hoping that when Dr. Navarro comes on, I might bring up the fact that he is a regular contributor to the War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon, which is available at Apple and which is excellent and which I recommend and listen to every day. I don't miss it. It's archived there. You can listen live or archive. And Steve is just getting into incredible things. I mean, he's got this guy on, Joe Allen, who is illustrating this. It was really following the issue of transhumanism and what that is. He's talking about the movement of November 3rd and developments in terms of investigating that. I think we all know what I'm talking about. He has the people from Revolver who are doing research on the Capitol incursion of January 6th and who have uncovered incredible information, some of which has now been reported in the New York Times, which indicates that the ringleaders, or many of the ringleaders, appear to have been FBI agents or FBI assets. All right, looks like we're getting a call. Hello, thank you for joining me.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, fine, thanks. What's on your mind?
I want to talk about transhumanism.
Great.
This is something that most people, I don't think, have made the connection. And I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say this, because I know it can ruffle a few feathers.
Right.
But you've heard of the USS Liberty. I don't hate Jewish people or anything like that. But there was some Russians who believed in transhumanism and they believed in the Egyptian stuff, like the half dog or whatever, half human. In the Greeks, they had the half man, half horse.
Mm-hmm.
The Russians wanted to go into Egypt and find those secrets. And I think the U.S. government in Israel, that's why they did that to the USS Liberty. And this transhumanism stuff is very evil. And everybody who's good, I don't care if you're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, we all have to stick together. They've been trying to get this technology for a very long time. And that's why the U.S. wanted to invade Egypt and get those secrets before the Russians did.
Okay, listen, it's a big subject. I got David Harsanyi joining me now. Call back and we can talk about that further. I'm interested in it. My understanding is that the USS Liberty, the problem with it was that for some reason the United States was transmitting Israeli military secrets to Egypt in the middle of the 7-day war, and that Israel warned the United States to not do this. I don't know why they would have been doing it, and they wouldn't stop. It was in the middle of a war, so they burned away the radar on top of that ship, and unfortunately some people died. But anyway, listen, I don't want to cut you off, but I got to go. I got David Harsanyi joining me, but thanks a lot. Call again, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. All right, David Harsanyi is with us. Let's just see if we can ring him up here. David, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for joining me. David Harsanyi is the author of Eurotrash, Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. He is a writer at the National Review. He's a senior writer there. David, so, we have a history in this country that involves a slight inferiority complex when we look particularly at Great Britain, but generally at Europe, as if we are to somehow learn something from them. I think it's a bit of a cultural snobbery in a way that has been embraced by the left, who uses this phony British sounding accent when they do their broadcasts, not to take a shot. But what is the deal with that, and how are we to view Europe now?
Well, we need to put it in perspective, and I'll give you one stat that kind of amazed me that I saw was that if Britain was a state in the United States, if we invaded Britain and made them a state, they would be the second poorest per capita after Mississippi. So and most European countries would be in the bottom third, including Germany and others. The only countries that do better are city-states like Luxembourg or Monaco. These aren't real places.
Right, they don't really count.
Exactly. Right, exactly. To scale it to 350 million people more is, I think, quite an accomplishment. So, but when I dive into these issues in my book, you can look at, cultural, economic issues for sure, but others. We outperform Europe on tolerance, on entrepreneurship, on technology, culture, in my opinion, and morality as well, as of how we treat our citizens. So don't get me wrong, Europe is wonderful, and in many ways they're probably the second best place to be on Earth, and we've taken our greatest ideas from their culture. But we, I think, have improved upon them, and they've manifested in ways because of our geography and because of the people who came here, self-selected risk takers who came here. I think we need to look inward, not outward, to solve our problems.
I mean, we've always been richer than Europe, even in colonial times, which is one of the causes of the American Revolution. I mean, Britain was top heavy with mercantile monopolies, but yet the average person in Britain was poor. And, you can still trace that to today. We always were a nation of small shop owners, small businessmen. It's much more diverse economically in terms of a much broader footprint of success. Whereas I think in Europe you have, an aristocracy that is extremely rich, and you've got generally an emergence out of a semi-feudal system where people are subjects of the state. So it's a very different philosophy, and I think you make this point quite well, and you show this. Now, since World War II, of course, when we pulled Europe's, out of the fire twice, at great American sacrifice of life and of property, It seems like they are, the population is aging. You've got an influx of Muslim immigrants who they hope are going to pick up the slack in terms of maintaining their welfare state and continuing to pay into the system. And that's not really working that well. And you seem to have a great dysfunction in that society overall. What is the present condition in Europe in that sense?
Well, Europe is old. I believe Germany might be the second oldest, major nation in the world after Japan. It would need to import around, I think, like 500,000 immigrants yearly to maintain its economic position with growth and things like that. So they're not the only country in trouble. Italy, Spain, the Mediterranean countries people have very few children. Obviously, we're on a similar trajectory, so it's concerning. But
Right.
So they have opened their borders to huge, immigration. And I'm pro-immigration. Obviously, I'm the son of immigrants myself. But
Sure.
America's built for immigrants in many ways. We assimilate them in many ways. Where I live, I have neighbors who, in other situations, would be killing each other, but here they live in peace. There's never been in human history anything like it. I mean, we have all types of people who were our enemies in the world elsewhere living together, sharing the same experiences and things like that. It's not because they're diverse, it's because they accept that when they come here, they have to live under certain ideals and certain rules and a certain sort of society. But in Europe, you don't have that. You have an influx of people, and then you have sort of islands, compartmentalized ethnic groups who do not assimilate very quickly. Some do, but not that often. And it's not just their fault, it's the fault of the nations that host them, who have structural problems and political problems that create this. And then because of this, you have then a reaction quite often of ethno-nationalistic, xenophobic kind of thing, thoughts and politics, that then you have that danger as well. So it's just an unhealthy situation in Europe.
Okay, let me just again mention that David Harsanyi is the author of Eurotrash, Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. I want to bear down a little bit on that because I think that the lack of assimilation in Europe has to do with a culture that is different than the United States. Europeans tend to be a bit more tribal. They tend to be a bit more ethno-nationalist. Whereas in America, we generally, and not perfectly, of course, we're no utopia, but generally we admire accomplishment, we admire achievement, we admire, we uphold the businessman and the small business as the first society in history that honors that. And so ethnic groups tend to assimilate better here while retaining elements of their identity. I mean, that's fine, always have. I mean, we could go back to the writings of John Adams who talked about that. And yet in Europe, you have a clash of kind of tribalistic identities that not only are there as pre-existing, but the new immigrants, it reinforces that element in their own culture, as opposed to inviting them to really become successful in the host culture. So I think there is a difference between immigration to Europe and immigration to the United States.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. America isn't always perfect, but it is a meritocracy for the most part. It's not to say that, there's a much more class movement. There's less tribalism, as you say. People don't feel, though they hold on to their faith or aspects of their culture, they don't feel confined by them. We are friends with all kinds of people who aren't like us here. It's not even thought about twice to do it. Whereas in Europe, you have entire neighborhoods of immigrants in Sweden, in France, and Germany for decades. I'm not talking about, when, certain immigrants came over, Italians, let's say, or Jews, they would be, congregate in the Lower East Side, let's say, but it only took a generation or two for them to filter out into America. Whereas there are Turkish immigrants in Germany, for instance, who live in the same places generationally. It's a problem. Very high unemployment for immigrants there. It's a very different world here. And I think part of it is because we don't have a welfare state here, really. You have to take care of yourself, or or you don't get to, or
Yeah.
maybe your neighbor will take care of you, not the state. So you rely on the state, you rely on your own gumption, your own hard work, these sorts of things. And that's to say that Germans aren't lazy people by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not the same kind of risk-taking society, messy,
Right.
entrepreneurial outlook on the world that you have here as in Europe. And that manifests in all the companies and all the ideas we have. I'll give you one really quick fact is that in 2020, every single Nobel Prize winner was either American or a team with an American on it. That's not an accident. It's not like Europe's a small or poor place. It's just that we view the world very differently.
And you say that like the immigrants in this case, Turkish immigrants to Germany remain sort of very close knit and within their own confines. That's because that's how Europeans themselves seem to be. You've got families that they're in the same professions, the same village, the same house, going back generations, probably centuries. And, it's very different in that sense than America. The other element, I think, of the European personality, and again, I'm not saying this in a chauvinistic sense that people are hidebound to this, but we have to look at the elephant in the room there in terms of why Europe gave birth to both communism and Nazism. It's because people are not used to the idea of individual identity, of rights coming from God and not the state. They tend to be submissive. In Britain, people are subjects to the Queen. They're not citizens. There's this idea of like the state basically having almost some sort of a mystical power. I know it was reinforced in modern times by Hegel and by certain German philosophers, but it goes back to, the ancient hoary idea of the God King and of the divine right of kings. And that America, at essence, rejected that idea. I mean, it's one of the things that made us who we are. Our governing philosophy, was that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by God, not by the state. So, what say you?
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. Obviously, faith is dying in Europe faster than even here. So I think faith is incredibly important. Not only in a personal sense, you go to church, it's for your own self-worth and being, but for society, because you believe there are things bigger than yourself. The more religious you are in America, the more likely you are to value the Constitution and be patriotic. It's just a fact. The more charity you give, and things like that. So in Europe, all those things are dying. So I think people feel, there's a fealty to the state, and they are compliant people. I mean, in general, but especially like in Scandinavia, in Finland, I think 91% of the people are like the government. And when the government changes, 91% people still like the government. So it's just how they are. When people talk about unity here, that's a terrible idea. The whole point of the United States is that we can all be individuals, that we can have all kinds of people living under the umbrella of freedom. That's not an idea. Sometimes I talk to Europeans, they don't even understand or comprehend things like the Second Amendment. It just does not compute because they don't value or they don't have a tradition. In England they do, but in other places they don't very much, of self-defense, of individual right to defend yourself, your family, your property from the state, not just from some criminal. That is a foreign idea to them because they view the state in a very different way. And our DNA is not like that. We are, it's a reason that we wouldn't accept 65% income taxation to have a giant welfare state. Maybe some people would, but I don't think the vast majority of the Americans are prepared for that kind of bureaucracy and that kind of, being compelled to give that much of their work over to the state.
No, I mean, and I think the people who would accept that in this country are the very same people who often, personally avoid it because they're rich and because they have everything sheltered nicely so that they don't have to bear the brunt of it. Do you think, David, that we are becoming more like Europe? I mean, are we becoming, I mean, maybe it's because of the pandemic makes me wonder this and our response to that we are becoming much more open to being fealty to the state, and that, the government knows best, and that whatever the government tells us through their official organs has to be true, and that, they have the special appointed scientists who tell us what's going on, and that anyone disagrees with that is demonized. Do you think that this is something that's developing here more than it had?
Yeah, yes, I do. Among certain populations, I think what the pandemic did was sort of a shock to me. Not the pandemic, obviously, nothing we could do about that, but the way that governors, through fiat, unilaterally, without any debate, without any election, without any vote, without any say from the people, could just shut down a church or shut down a business, and people would comply because they were scared. I'm not saying it's wrong to be scared, but that's just not how Americans usually have been.
No.
I can't think of another instance for a long time. Maybe during the New Deal, people were like this. I don't know. But so this is new, and I think it's a bit scary because we found out later how wrong they were about so many things, and we never got to debate them. But clearly, many people like to be told, they marched. Listen, I'm not saying don't take care of yourself. If you want to wear a mask, whatever you want to do, that's fine by me. But the way that we have an unelected doctor just with diktats about where we can go or shop or say or do,
Right, whether we're gonna have Christmas.
Yeah, it's really off-putting because we're a nation that typically wouldn't listen to directions in that way. That's why we are the way we are. So yeah, I think that it's a big problem. Again, I think there are big parts of this country where that's not the case, but I think there are progressives, especially urbanites, especially people who are addicted to looking to the state for answers because they have frankly, they don't have any other religion. That's their faith, and they look to the government for guidance on all things. That's a very European way to look at the world.
Right. I mean, the state, in a sense, replaces religion, and Europe doesn't have a strong sense of separation between government and religion. The state is I think part of a negative side of the Protestant Reformation was that the church became a state religion in Protestant countries. And then, of course, the Roman Catholics view a universal governance, if you will, on earth of a religion that has a lot of say in states. Whereas,
many European countries have state religions still to this day that are, even though they're dying out of parishioners, they're still funded by the state. And I don't know if Americans realize that is so. When I say I think that losing faith is a bad idea on a moral and sort of societal grounds, I don't mean that it's okay, that I'm pro a state and religion being in one unit. I just mean that I think personal faith is important in the way that Americans live their lives, not state funded or state backed church, things like that.
Right, and then the American ethos, in a sense, is religious, in that part of our political philosophy, as I mentioned, is that we're endowed by the Creator, however we define that, and that means that rights come from something outside of government. There's something more universal and irrefutable and immutable about rights that the government can't manipulate. That we rely on the Creator as opposed to the government, and I worry that we might have forgotten who we are, which is why, in a way, your book is important here. Eurotrash: Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. And I mean, certainly the two ideas that came out of Europe in the 20th century were communism and Nazism. And both involved this utopian idea of the state as transforming human nature. If you listen to some of the rhetoric of the left, it sounds a lot like that's what they believe in. Of course, Adolf Hitler used the Jews as a scapegoat and, as a foci outside of Germany to blame social problems and advance Germany. But if you listen to the left, you hear them doing the same thing, except instead of the Jews, it's, the corporate greed, or the millionaires and the billionaires, like Elizabeth Warren likes to say. In other words, they're tearing down anyone who, is not seen as part of what they define as the norm.
Yeah, I mean, American idea was never utopian. I mean,
Right.
the founders didn't promise you that you were going to be rich or that you would have this or have that. They promised you that you'd be free and that you'd be able to pursue those things without interference from the state and now interference from your neighbor. So that's a huge difference. And I think the idea, even if you're not a believer in God, the idea that rights are bestowed upon you and that not given to you by the state or afforded you by some bureaucrat, but given to you above that, is the most vital idea of America and about freedom and about individual freedom. And I don't think that a lot of progressives, at least, and some conservatives too, believe that anymore. I think they believe they need to use the state to compel others to act in certain ways. You're right, I think, about communism and fascism. They take the place of faith. It's not like communists. Communism was anti-faith, and Nazism was anti-faith. I mean,
Of course, communism is outright atheist, whereas Nazism tended to be into the sort of paganistic, pre-Christian type of faith, of a mystical, super race, that kind of stuff. So, David Harsanyi, why is Europe now becoming undone? I mean, why is it falling apart at this time?
Well, I think it's the many pressures. The pressure of declining birth rates and the immigration problem is huge because it's only growing. The fastest growing religion in many European countries is Islam. And there's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong fundamentally with a Muslim person. I'm just saying that the European idea does not always comport with Orthodox Islamic ideas. And without assimilating people who believe in things that are alien to your culture, you're going to have a big problem. So when you don't have children and they have children and you keep letting in new people in big numbers from the same area and same place who believe the same thing, that's going to be a problem for you. We don't have that problem here yet. Even our Muslim immigrants assimilate very well. Usually they do very well in the American system, but that's not the case in Europe. So I think that's one of the biggest problems. But that is just happening because Europe has lost its way. There's no real European idea. The European Union was created as an economic counterforce to the United States, essentially. Right. And it was supposed to function under the federalist idea of the United States. That actually the early founders of the European Union and the idea believed in federalism as it's practiced or ostensibly practiced by the United States. But they've of course now just created a centralized super state that tries to tell every society and very diverse societies and cultures how they should live. And that I think is problematic. I just don't see that surviving in the 21st century. And my point is that we should abide by federalism. It's what makes us truly diverse and truly strong and truly able to have a lot of different people living here peacefully. And we don't need centralized super state in Washington. We need right. What the founders envisioned.
Now, what about the pushback in Europe, particularly in Great Britain with Brexit? And now you have Hungary with Orban and Poland and some of the Eastern European countries who have recently emerged out of the communist tyranny. Before that, they had the Nazi tyranny. They seem to be moving in the right direction. I mean, Poland is like an economic powerhouse, comparatively speaking. I mean, it's really inspiring. Do you think that there's hope there? And do you think that that idea might take hold in other parts of Europe?
Obviously, I'm a big fan of Brexit. I'm not there, so it's not my business in a way, you know what I mean? But I think that that certainly was heartening to see. I don't know if it's too late for, and it's not to say Europe's going to collapse like the Roman Empire or anything. It's just to say that these countries won't be the same places they were in many ways. They're going to lose their identity and so on. As far as Eastern and Central European countries go, my parents are from Hungary, and I understand their inclination. Here we have a 200-year whatever history. They remember that they were invaded by Islam, and they remember history, and these things are not that simple for them. But I wish they were a little less authoritarian sometimes in other ways with the media and so on. So I'm not a huge fan of Orban, but I do think that Hungary and Poland are grappling with things let me just say this. I don't think they're any more authoritarian than Western European countries. They're just more statist in different ways. You know what I mean? So I wish that they would become a little more liberal in the true sense when it comes to free speech and stuff. But I don't, I do like a lot of the things they're doing. I don't love everything they're doing.
And also, I mean, Europe obviously is the cradle of Christian civilization and of Christianity, and yet Christianity does seem to be on the decline in Europe, while at the same time, it's on the ascent in Southern Africa and in China and elsewhere in the world. So what do you account for that?
I don't know why people lose. We're on the same trajectory, right? In some ways here. So in after the Soviet Union fell, there was actually a slight rise in interest in religion and people going back to church, obviously because communism tried to destroy that.
Right.
But since then, it's been downhill. Like the Czech Republic, I think 90% of citizens say they have no denomination or real religious affiliation. Some huge number.
Well, they've always been somewhat atheistic in the Czech Republic. I think it's the least religious country according to the Pew Research in the world.
They're very sophisticated,
It goes back
right?
to the Bohemians. It goes back to the rebellion by Jan Hus against the Catholic Church. Right. I think so. It's very specific to them, I think. But
but they're the worst, and they have been. You're right. But there other countries are, on the same trajectory. Maybe not Poland, maybe not Hungary, but France, Germany, all the Western European countries.
Yes.
I don't know why that happens. I think I don't know the reason for it. It's happening here as well. I think that people view themselves as too sophisticated for faith, and they think people who believe in God are slack-jawed yokels, and that's why, frankly, they look down at a lot of the United States and
the basket of deplorables.
Exactly. So, but I think that it is heartening that in Africa and in China and other places that people are finding Christianity. I'm not a Christian myself, but I think that those ideals are gird Western civilization, the idea of free choice and individual rights and freedom, and all the things that we enjoy here, and all of classical liberalism. So I think it's quite important that we have people who believe. So when you don't, you have people searching out other things: fascism, ethno-nationalism, all kinds of, communism, socialism, bureaucratism, if that's a word. Technocrats are treated like priests in this world, and that's what Europe's quite like. And again, they're rich enough that they're not collapsing into poverty and into things like that, but they've lost their identity. And at some point, people, I think, crave that. Like, just the richer you are, there's a certain level of wealth you reach. You don't get happier after that level of wealth. You're just in the same place. And I think Europe is just, floundering in that way.
All right, David Harsanyi, listen, I've enjoyed the conversation. The book is Eurotrash: Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. Let my listeners and viewers know where they can get your book or articles that you're writing these days.
Well, they can read me at National Review or sometimes at the New York Post, and they can buy my book at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or all the places that sell books. I hope, unless there are supply chain problems. Hopefully not.
Another story. Although Amazon, admittedly, does a pretty good job. All right, David. Listen, thanks so much again for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. And we are back with some open lines. You're welcome to join the program. That was David Harsanyi. The book is Eurotrash: Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. You can join in if you'd like. What is the number here? If I could only know. The way to find out is to relog onto my Skype account. I'm so technically clumsy, but I was able to move forward from that interview. That's a big deal for me. 617-396-4958 is the number if you'd like to join the conversation. We can talk about David's book, or we could discuss anything you'd like to talk about in the confines of community standards, of course. 617-396-4958. At 2 p.m. today, I'm looking forward to having on Dr. Peter Navarro, who I really admire. He was part of the Trump administration as a chief economist and advisor, one of the masterminds, along with Steve Bannon, of the China trade policy and the idea of tariffs as a way to protect American industry and American labor. I think that by, frankly, any objective standard, one would have to note that whether you like Donald Trump or not, the Donald Trump administration was astonishingly successful. I would suggest the most successful since Franklin Roosevelt in terms of accomplishing their agenda, whether you agree with that agenda or not. And I think we could point to any area, any metric, and whether it be foreign policy, domestic economy, employment, job creation, trade, immigration, of course, and you will see housing, you will see enormous success, and that success is directly attributable to the policies of the Trump administration. So, and this was in the face of opposition that was not normal, media that was not normal. I mean, we could, Cheryl Atkinson is a very good reporter. She documents how the media, including the big media, like the people we normally respect, like the New York Times, would flat out lie to try to hurt Trump. They would run with a story with one anonymous source, and then the next day they'd retract the story only after the damage was done. We could go through many terrible lies. And the big ones, of course, being the phony impeachments and the harassment by these thugs, like the Mueller group with the brown shirts, going into the homes of an elderly man like Manafort or Roger Stone, completely harmless, guys, and dragging them out with SWAT teams when you have, the media lackeys parked on the front lawn filming the whole thing, and you've got leftists applauding and saying that this was great. You had racist thugs called Antifa and so-called Black Lives Matter looting Black businesses and burning Black neighborhoods around the country in the summer of 2020. Somehow this is Trump's fault. Look, we could get into that. It's a big subject. But suffice to say that I'm proud and happy to have Peter Navarro on. His book is In Trump Time, a journal of America's plague year. Let me give out the phone number. I'll probably sign off at the top of the hour and then come back for Peter Navarro. 617-396-4958 is the number. You're welcome to join the program. 617-396-4958. I want to just conclude a little bit with a little extra thought that I have from my interview with David Harsanyi, the author of Eurotrash. And that is that conservatives like myself have often been criticized for being nationalist, that somehow being a nationalist is a bad thing, that it implies that I have something against someone, whether it be an American or a foreigner. And I think that it's necessary to define terms here, because since we're talking about Europe, the American conception of nationalism is very different than that of any other nation, and certainly than that of the left, in that our loyalty to our nation state is based on a distrust of government, not a loyalty to the government itself, not a fealty to power and authority inside the nation state. It's the exact opposite for the American. We distrust government. This goes back to our revolution. This goes back to the writing of Thomas Paine, the author of Common Sense, where he says, this is the thesis of his book, Americans distrust government. We distrust corporations. We distrust powerful people who are in a position of influence by nature. That is who we are. And the reason we distrust these institutions of power, whether they be governments or oligarchs, is because we respect and we want to preserve and maintain our own individual sovereignty, our own rights, our God-given rights, and thus secure not only our rights and the rights of our families and our communities to live a life of relative freedom in the context of what's possible and government, but also as a means to secure our futures, the future of our people, the future of our families, the future of our children and their children, the future of our country. And that we see the best way to go about that is to not trust authority, to check and balance authority with that of our own individual authority, and to maintain an uneasy respect for government. So American nationalism is not worship of government. American nationalism is respect for the limited functions of government, and also a general respect for shared experience and shared history, and a sense of pride and a sense of cohesion in that sense. We respect a national culture, a national language, in a very loosely defined way, one that is inclusive of subcultures that might be very different. And that's why subcultures, in a sense, have been able to thrive in this country. I'll just give a quick example that neighbors of mine were ultra-Orthodox Jews, and they were people who, wore Black clothing, and they were strictly observant of Jewish law and kosher and the Shabbat. But yet they were as American as apple pie. They loved baseball. They loved American institutions. They loved America, and they contributed to America and do, and were proud to do so. So, we have, maybe it's a paradoxical situation, but we can have, and we do have, loyalty to and respect for the American system of government, the American culture, the American language, and at the same time, many of us choose to associate with various subcultures, or in some cases not associate. That's an individual right. And that this is, in the broad sense, and even in the somewhat unwieldy and messy sense, the definition of American nationalism. It is not what the left holds as hyper-nationalist, which is what they are. They're the ones that point the finger of nationalism. Oh, you're a nationalist. You have some. What kind of nationalism do they embrace? They embrace a nationalism that seeks literal, physical, and political control over the lives and the destinies of the citizen from an elite who claims to know better. They want to control education. They want to control the media. They want to control welfare. They want to control our health, decide what health modalities we should have to take and not take. They want to control all aspects of our lives. They want to control our property. They want to control our environment. You cannot name an area that the left doesn't want to control, because they think they're smarter than the rest of us, and they view government as a vehicle and as a tool that they can wield in their demented quest to create a one world ant colony. They think government is a surrogate for a world order that Karl Marx called communism, let's face it, where all of these institutions that create separation and that create inequality, like family, like love, like property, like the right to trade goods and services, like faith, that these things will all, as Karl Marx says, wither away because they're all manufactured. They're all forms of what Marx called false consciousness. They will wither away, and eventually we'll have this utopian universe where man will live in harmony with nature, allegedly, and where we will have given up all of these superstitions like property and faith and whatnot, and everyone will be de facto equal. There can't be anything more false and more evil than that. You know, that's an international ant colony where every individual will have to surrender their own consciousness, their own mind, and you will have a one world fused brain, basically. Anyway, on that note, I shall return at the top of the next hour with Dr. Peter Navarro. I'm looking forward to that. This show is self-sponsored, and of course, my books are available at Amazon Books. My latest book, The Satanic Conspiracy, The Spectre Haunting Mankind, by yours truly, Charles Moscowitz, is available at Amazon Books. Please also check my guest David Harsanyi's book out, Eurotrash, Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. And on that note, I shall return in the next hour. Thank you for joining me, everyone. God bless you all.